Happy Wednesday, maybe. Unfortunately, the lighting is unideal. I know that we're not here for the lighting, but it's just kind of splitting me right in half, and I look gray with this new hair color, but who cares? It's just splitting me right in half. So we're gonna stay here. It's 76 degrees in my house, which is really hot because it's not that hot outside, but I'm in a sweater and I was running a little bit behind today. So I'll be sweating. Yeah, hence the name of the garment. So we are continuing reading from the Necronomicon by H.P. Lovecraft. It is the last story. It's the Dream Quest of Unknown Kadath. So let's just find a spot to which we shall read and begin. I will reiterate a couple final sentences of where we ended off yesterday because this story has no chapters. So, then by the watery moonlight, he noticed an odd high monolith in the middle of that central court and saw that something was tied to it. And when, after getting a telescope from the captain's cabin, he saw that bound thing was a sailor in the silk robes of Oriab, headed downward and without any eyes. He was glad that a rising breeze soon took the ship ahead to more healthy parts of the sea. I also didn't sleep a single wink last night, so bear with me. The next day they spoke with a ship with violet sails bound for Zar in the land of forgotten dreams, with bulbs of strange colored lilies for cargo. And on the evening of the 11th day, they came in sight of the Isle of Oriab, with Negranic rising jagged and snow-crowned in the distance. Oriab is a very great isle, and its port of Bahama, a mighty city. The wharves of Bahama are of porphyry, and the city rises in great stone terraces behind them, having streets of steps that are frequently arched over by buildings, and the bridges between buildings. There is a great canal which goes under the whole city in a tunnel with granite gates, and leads to the inland lake of Yath, on whose farther shore are the vast clay brick ruins of a primal city whose name is not remembered. As the ship drew into the harbor at evening, the twin beacons Thon and Thal gleamed a welcome, and in all the million windows of Baharna's terraces, mellow lights peeped out quietly and gradually as the stars peep out overhead in the dusk, till that steep and climbing seaport became a glittering constellation hung between the stars of heaven and the reflections of those stars in the still harbor. The captain, after landing, made Carter a guest in his own small house on the shores of Yath, where the rear of the town slopes down to it, and his wife and servants brought strange, toothsome foods for the traveler's delight. And in the days after that, Carter asked for rumors and legends of Negranic and all the taverns and public places where lava gatherers and image makers meet, but could find no one who had been up the higher slopes or seen the carven face. Negranic was a hard mountain with only an accursed valley behind it, and besides, one could never depend on the certainty that night gaunts are altogether fabulous. Hi. When the captain sailed back to Dilathleen, Carter took quarters in an ancient tavern opening on an alley of steps in the original part of town, which is built of brick and resembles the ruins of Yath's farther shore. Here he laid his plans for the ascent of Negranic and correlated all that he had learned from the lava gatherers about the roads thither. The keeper of the tavern was a very old man and had heard so many legends that he was a great help. He even took Carter to an upper room in that ancient house and showed him a crude picture which a traveler had scratched on the clay wall in the old days when men were bolder and less reluctant to visit Negranic's higher slopes. The old tavern keeper's great-grandfather had heard from his great-grandfather that the traveler who scratched that picture had climbed Negranic and seen the carven face, here drawing it for others to behold. But Carter had very great doubts, since the large, rough features on the wall were hasty and careless, and wholly overshadowed by a crowd of little companion shapes in the worst possible taste, with horns and wings and claws and curling tails. At last, having gained all the information he was likely to gain in the taverns and public places of Baharna, Carter hired a zebra and set out one morning on the road by Yath's shore for those inland parts wherein towers stony Negranic. On his right were rolling hills and pleasant orchards and neat little stone farmhouses, and he was much reminded of those fertile fields that flank the sky. By evening he was near the nameless ancient ruins on Yath's farther shore, and though old lava-gatherers had warned him not to camp there at night, he tethered his zebra to a curious pillar before a crumbling wall and laid his blanket in a sheltered corner beneath some carvings whose meaning none could decipher. Around him he wrapped another blanket, for the nights are cold in Oriab, and when upon awaking once he thought he felt the wings of some insect brushing his face, he covered his head altogether and slept in peace till roused by the maga birds in distant resin groves. The sun had just come up over the great slope, whereon leagues of primal brick foundations and worn walls and occasional cracked pillars and pedestals stretched down desolate to the shores of Yath, and Carter looked about for his tethered zebra. What's going on here? Currently on a 3-stream streak. Yay! That's so fun. Great was his dismay to see that docile beast stretched prostrate beside the curious pillar to which it had been tied, and still greater was he vexed on finding that the steed was quite dead, with its blood all sucked away through a singular wound in its throat. His pack had been disturbed, and several shiny knickknacks taken away, and all around on the dusty soil were great webbed footprints for which he could not in any way account. The legends and warnings of lava-gatherers occurred to him, and he thought of what had brushed his face in the night. Then he shouldered his pack and strode on toward Nagranic, though not without a shiver when he saw close to him as the highway passed through the ruins, a great gaping arch low in the wall of an old temple, with steps leading down into darkness further than he could peer. His course now lay uphill through wilder and partly wooded country, and he saw only the huts of charcoal burners and the camp of those who gathered resin from the groves. The whole air was fragrant with balsam, and all the maga birds sang blithely as they flashed their 7 colors in the sun. Near sunset, he came on a new camp of lava-gatherers, returning with laden sacks from Nagranic's lower slopes. And here he also camped, listening to the songs and tales of the men, and overhearing what they whispered about a companion they had lost. He had climbed high to reach a mass of fine lava above him, and at nightfall did not return to his fellows. When they looked for him the next day, they found only his turban, nor was there any sign on the crags below that he had fallen. They did not search any more, because the old man among them said it would be of no use. No one ever found what the night gaunts took, though those beasts themselves were so uncertain as to be almost fabulous. Carter asked them if night gaunts sucked blood and liked shiny things and left webbed footprints, but they all shook their heads negatively and seemed frightened at his making such an inquiry. When he saw how taciturn they had become, he asked them no more, but went to sleep in his blanket. The next day, he rose with the lava-gatherers and exchanged farewells as they rode west, and he rode east on a zebra he had bought of them. Their older men gave him blessings and warnings, and told him he had better not climb too high on Nagranic, but while he thanked them heartily, he was in no wise dissuaded. For still did he feel that he must find the gods on unknown Kadath, and win from them a way to that haunting and marvelous city in the sunset. By noon, after a long uphill ride, he came upon some abandoned brick villages of the high people who had once dwelt thus close to Nagranic and carved images from its smooth lava. Here they had dwelt till the days of the old tavern keeper's grandfather, and about that time they felt that their presence was disliked. Their homes had crept even up the mountain slope, and the higher they built, the more people they would miss when the sun rose. At last, they decided it would be better to leave altogether, since things were sometimes glimpsed in the darkness, which no one could interpret favorably. So in the end, all of them went down to the sea and dwelt in Baharna, inhabiting a very old quarter, and teaching their sons the old art of image-making, which to this day they carry on. It was from these children of the exiled hill people that Carter had heard the best tales about Nagranic when searching through Baharna's ancient taverns. All this time, the great gaunt side of Nagranic was looming up higher and higher as Carter approached it. There were sparse trees on the lower slopes and feeble shrubs above them, And then the bare, hideous rock rose spectral into the sky to mix with frost and ice and eternal snow. Carter could see the rifts and ruggedness of that somber stone and did not welcome the prospect of climbing it. In places, there were solid streams of lava and scoriac heaps that littered slopes and ledges. 90 eons ago, before even the gods had danced upon its pointed peak, that mountain had spoken with fire and roared with the voices of the inner thunders. Now it towered all silent and sinister, bearing on the hidden side that secret Titan image whereof rumor told. And there were caves in that mountain, which might be empty and alone with elder darkness, or might, if legend spoke truly, hold horrors of a form not to be surmised. The ground sloped upward to the foot of Nagranic, thinly covered with scrub oaks and ash trees, and strewn with bits of rock, lava, and ancient cinder. There were the charred embers of many camps, where the lava gatherers were wont to stop, and several rude altars which they had built, either to propitiate the Great Ones, or to ward off what they dreamed of in Nagranic's high passes and labyrinthine caves. At evening, Carter reached the furthermost pile of embers and camped for the night, tethering his tethering his zebra to a sapling and wrapping himself well in his blankets before going to sleep. Do you remember him getting another zebra? I don't. And all through the night, a Vunith howled distantly from the shore of some hidden pool, but Carter felt no fear of that amphibious terror, since he had been told with certainty that not one of them dares even approach the slope of Nagranic. In the clear sunshine of morning, Carter began the long ascent, taking his zebra as far as that useful beast could go, but tying it to a stunted ash tree when the floor of the thin wood became too steep. Thereafter, he scrambled up alone, first through the forest with its ruins of old villages and overgrown clearings, and then over the tough grass where anemic shrubs grew here and there. He regretted coming clear of the trees, since the slope was very precipitous and the whole thing rather dizzying. At length, he began to discern all the countryside spread out beneath him wherever he looked about. The deserted huts of the image makers, the groves of resin trees, and the camps of those who gathered from them. The woods where prismatic magaz nest and sing, and even a hint very far away of the shores of Yath and of those forbidding ancient ruins whose name is forgotten. He found it best not to look around and keep on climbing and climbing till the shrubs become very sparse and there was often nothing but the tough grass to cling to. Then the soil became meager, with great patches of bare rock cropping out, and now and then the nest of a condor in a crevice. Finally, there was nothing at all but bare rock, and had it not been very rough and weathered, he could scarcely have ascended further. Knobs, ledges, and pinnacles, however, helped greatly, and it was cheering to see occasionally the sign of some lava-gatherer scratched clumsily in the friable stone, and know that wholesome human creatures had been there before him. After a certain height, the presence of man was further shown by handholds and footholds hewn where they were needed, and by little quarries and excavations where some choice vein of stream or lava had been found. In one place, a narrow ledge had been chopped artificially to an especially rich deposit far to the right of the main line of ascent. Once or twice, Carter dared to look around, and was almost stunned by the spread of the landscape below. All the island betwixt him and the coast lay open to his sight, with Baharna's stone terraces and the smoke of its chimneys mystical in the distance. And beyond that, the illimitable southern sea with all its curious secrets. Thus far, there had been much winding around the mountain, so that the further and carven side was still hidden. Carter now saw a ledge running upward and to the left, which seemed to head the way he wished, and this course he took in the hope that it might prove continuous. After 10 minutes, he saw it was indeed no cul-de-sac, but that it led steeply on in an arc, which would, unless suddenly interrupted or deflected, bring him, after a few hours' climbing, to that unknown southern slope overlooking the desolate crags and the accursed valley of lava. As new country came into view below him, he saw that it was bleaker and wilder than those seaward lands he had traversed. The mountainside, too, was somewhat different, being here pierced by curious cracks in caves not found on the straighter route he had left. Some of these were above him and some beneath him, all opening on sheerly perpendicular cliffs and wholly unreachable by the feet of man. The air was very cold now, but so hard was the climbing that he did not mind it. Only the increasing rarity bothered him, and he thought that perhaps it was this which had turned the heads of other travelers and excited those absurd tales of night gaunts, whereby they explained the loss of such climbers as fell from these perilous paths. He was not much impressed by travelers' tales, and he had a good curved scimitar in case of any trouble. All lesser thoughts were lost in the wish to see that carven face, which might set him on the track of the gods atop unknown Kadath. I'm going to take a little water break. I also feel like there's a Night Gaunt poem at the beginning of the Necronomicon. Maybe. Let's see. Is this it? Obviously, this isn't a poem, but is this what he's going to? Maybe. Maybe. Question mark. There is a Night Gaunt poem. There is a Night Gaunt poem. I'm going to read it really quick. Night Gaunts. Out of what crypt they crawl, I cannot tell, but every night I see the rubbery things, black, horned, and slender, with membranous wings. They come in legions on the north wind's swell, with obscene clutch that titillates and stings, snatching me off on monstrous voyagings to grey worlds hidden deep in nightmare's well. Over the jagged peaks of Thok they sweep, heedless of all the cries I tried to make, and down the nether pits to that foul lake, where the puffed shoggoths splash in doubtful sleep. But ho, if only they would make some sound, or wear a face where faces should be found. Bariki. Okay. Yeah, I thought it sounded familiar. At last, in the fearsome iciness of upper space, he came round fully to the hidden side of Negranic, and saw, in infinite gulfs below him, the lesser crags and sterile abysses of lava, which marked the olden wrath of the great ones. There was unfolded, too, a vast expanse of country to the south, but it was a desert land without fair fields or cottage chimneys, and seemed to have no ending. No trace of the sea was visible on this side, for Oriab is a great island. Black caverns and odd crevices were still numerous on the sheer vertical cliffs, but none of them was accessible to a climber. There now loomed aloft a great beetling mass which hampered the upward view, and Carter was, for a moment, shaken with doubt lest it prove impassable. Poised in windy insecurity miles above earth, with only space and death on one side, and only slippery walls of rock on the other, he knew for a moment the fear that makes men shun Negranic's. He knew for a moment the fear that makes men shun Negranic's hidden side. He could not turn around, yet the sun was already low. If there were no way aloft, the night would find him crouching there still, and the dawn would not find him at all. But there was a way, and he saw it in due season. Only a very expert dreamer could have used those imperceptible footholds, yet to Carter they were sufficient. Surmounting now the outward hanging rock, he found the slope above much easier than that below, since a great glacier's melting had left a generous space with loam and ledges. To the left, a precipice dropped straight from unknown heights to unknown depths, with a cave's dark mouth just out of reach above him. Elsewhere, however, the mountain slanted back strongly, and even gave him space to lean and rest. He felt from the chill that he must be near the snow line, and looked up to see what glittering pinnacles might be shining in that late ruddy sunlight. Sure enough, there was the snow uncounted thousands of feet above, and below it a great beetling crag like that he had just climbed, hanging there forever in bold outline. And when he saw that crag, he gasped and cried out aloud, and clutched at the jagged rock in awe, for the Titan bulge had not stayed as Earth's dawn had shaped it, but gleamed red and stupendous in the sunset with the carved and polished faces of a god. Stern and terrible shone that face that the sunset lit with fire. How vast it was no mind can ever measure, but Carter knew at once that man could never have fashioned it. It was a god chiseled by the hands of the gods, and it looked down haughty and majestic upon the seeker. Rumor had said it was strange and not to be mistaken, and Carter saw that it was indeed so, for those long, narrow eyes and long lobed ears, and that thin nose and pointed chin, all spoke of a race that is not of men, but of gods. He clung overawed in that lofty and perilous eyrie, even though it was this which he had expected and come to find. For there is in a god's face more of marvel than prediction can tell, and when that face is vaster than a great temple, and seen looking downward at sunset, in the septic silences of that upper world, from whose dark lava it was divinely hewn of old, the marvel is so strong that none may escape it. Here, too, was the added marvel of recognition, for although he had planned to search all dreamland over for those whose likeness to this face might mark them as the gods' children, he now knew that he need not do so. Certainly, the great face carven on that mountain was of no strange sort, but the kin of such as he had seen often in the taverns of the seaport Celephius, which lies at Nargai, beyond the Tenarian hills, and is ruled over by that King Kuranes, whom Carter once knew in waking life. Every year, sailors with such a face came in dark ships from the north to trade their onyx for the carved jade and spun gold and little red singing birds of Celephius, and it was clear that these could be no others than the half-gods he sought. Where they dwelt, there must the cold waste lie close, and within it unknown Kadath and its onyx castle for the great ones. So to Celephius he must go, far distant from the Isle of Oriab, and in such parts as would take him back to Dilathleen, and up the sky to the bridge by Nir, and again into the enchanted wood of the Zoogs, whence the way would bend northward through the garden lands, by Okranos to the gilded spires of Thran, where he might find a galleon bound over the Serenarian Sea. Where are you from? I am Canadian. Oh, that's right where the camera is. I'm going to come at it in this angle. I just want to see something. Okay. Just kidding. I'm Canadian. Where are you from? But dusk was now thick, and the great carven face looked down even sterner in shadow. Perched on that ledge, night found the seeker, and in the blackness he might neither go down nor go up, but only stand and cling and shiver in that narrow place till the day came, praying to keep awake lest sleep lose his hold and send him down the dizzy miles of air to the crags and sharp rocks of the accursed valley. The stars came out, but save for them, there was only black nothingness in his eyes, nothingness leagued with death, against whose beckoning he might do no more than cling to the rocks and lean back away from an unforeseen brink. The last thing of earth that he saw on the gloaming was a condor soaring close to the westward precipice beside him, and darting, screaming away when it came near the cave whose mouth yawned just out of reach. Suddenly, without a warning sound in the dark, Carter felt his curved scimitar drawn stealthily out of his belt by some unseen hand. Then he heard it clatter down over the rocks below, and between him and the Milky Way, he thought he saw a very terrible outline of something noxiously thin and horned and tailed and bat-winged. Other things, too, had begun to blot out patches of stars west of him, as if a flock of vague entities were flapping thickly and silently out of that inaccessible cave in the face of the precipice. Then a sort of cold, rubbery arm seized his neck, and something else seized his feet, and he was lifted inconsiderately up and swung about in space. Another minute and the stars were gone, and Carter knew that the night gaunts had got him. Dun, dun, dun. They bore him breathless into that cliffside cavern and through monstrous labyrinths beyond. When he struggled, as at first he did by instinct, they tickled him with deliberation. They made no sound at all themselves, and even their membranous wings were silent. They were frightfully cold and damp and slippery, and their paws needed one detestably. Soon they were plunging hideously downward through inconceivable abysses, in a whirling, giddying, sickening rush of dank tomb-like air, and Carter felt they were shouting into the ultimate vortex of shrieking and demonic madness. He screamed again and again, but whenever he did so, the black paws tickled him with greater subtlety. Then he saw a sort of gray phosphorescence about, and guessed they were coming even to that inner world of subterranean horror of which dim legends tell, and which is litten only by the pale death fire wherewith reeks the ghoulish air and the primal mists of the pits at earth's core. At last, far below him, he saw faint lines of grey and ominous pinnacles, which he knew must be the fabled peaks of Throck. Awful and sinister they stand, in the haunted discs of sunless and eternal depths, higher than man may reckon, and guarding terrible valleys where the beholes? It says beholes. Higher than man may reckon, and guarding terrible valleys where the beholes crawl and burrow nastily. It's just goofy. But Carter preferred to look at them than his captors, which were indeed shocking and uncouth black things with smooth, oily, whale-like surfaces, unpleasant horns that curved inward towards each other, bat wings whose beating made no sound, ugly prehensile paws, and barbed tails that lashed needlessly and disquietingly. And worst of all, they never spoke or laughed, and never smiled, because they had no faces at all to smile with, but only a suggestive blankness where a face ought to be. All they ever did was clutch and fly and tickle. That was the way of the night gaunts. As the band flew lower, the peaks of Throck rose grey and towering on all sides, and one saw clearly that nothing lived on that austere and impressive granite of the endless twilight. At still lower levels, the death fires in the air gave out, and one met only the primal blackness of the void, save aloft, where the thin peaks stood out goblin-like. Soon the peaks were very far away, and nothing about but greater rushing winds with the dankness of nethermost grottos in them. Then in the end, the night gaunts landed on a floor of unseen things which felt like layers of bones, and left Carter all alone in that black valley. To bring him thither was the duty of the night gaunts that guard Negranic, and this done, they flapped away silently. When Carter tried to trace their flight, he found he could not, since even the peaks of Throck had faded out of sight. There was nothing anywhere but blackness and horror and silence and bones. And I think, as I'm fading out of the sun, I think that's a great place to stop. So, thank you so much for reading with me. I will upload this on YouTube. It's the same name as this channel. It's K.A. Reads Classics. It's all one word, no space. And we will be back tomorrow. So, have a great day. Thanks for reading with me. Bye.